Well, welcome everybody to Dr. Ron Oberstein. Welcome to the LifeWest Leadership Line. Today I have a phenomenal doctor and medical doctor, actually an MD, Dr. Sahil Chopra. Sahil, welcome to the LifeWest Leadership Line.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to move into this conversation, and I'm sure our viewers will love, whatever comes out of it, because we're just going to kind of go. But I do want to just share with our viewers a little bit about Dr. Sahil. Number one, he got his medical degree from India. He's got roots in India and came over to the U.S. I'm just going to kind of read down what I have here. And he did his residency in the U.S. Through UCLA, and then went on to do pulmonary and critical care work at Loma Linda, California. That was a 3-year condensed thing. And right now he's at Harvard doing a sleep medicine fellowship right now at Harvard. So we're talking to you from Boston, Massachusetts, right? He's got a wife and 2 small kids, 3 and 5 years old. They're just kind of waking up right now. So he's actually at the gym. He's got a 1-bedroom in Boston, but he's at the gym right now, being able to communicate with us. So welcome again. And Sahil, let's get into it. Let's start talking about, tell us what's going on. Obviously, you've got pulmonary medicine and, and this COVID, 19, you must be doing, along with your fellowship. I know you're on the front lines, being in the hospitals and stuff. What have you been seeing around that?
Yeah, the situation's pretty bad. I've been sharing information with my family pretty routinely, and I've never seen such a homogenous population of patients in the ICU. One of the ICUs that I moonlight at, work part-time at, It's a small 12-bed ICU. I was there about 10, 15 days ago last. And usually what happens in a 12-bed ICU, there's about 3 or 4 beds that are on average empty. And of the other beds, you have a few patients who have pneumonia, a few patients who are maybe post-operative. You may have a few patients who are there for a stroke or some cardiovascular event. And it just blew my mind away that every individual that was admitted to the ICU had bad COVID pneumonia with acute respiratory distress syndrome. They're on the ventilator, paralyzed. One of them passed away that day, and it's a pretty grim picture.
Yeah.
Luckily, the hospital has been scaling up, and they have good systems in place of coming up with solutions of how to take this influx of patients. So making it easier for us to do what we do, but the situation is pretty grim, and I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, and I know that listen, anybody being on the front lines of this, it's my sister-in-law is a nurse in New Jersey actually, and their hospital, every bed is taken up right now, because New Jersey, and they're sending people from New York. She's just across the river, but and the stuff that she's talking about is just is really devastating, right? What they're seeing. And so I want to thank you for being on the front lines and putting yourself on the front lines with yourself and the nurses and every healthcare worker, that's out there doing that, because it's quite a toll, and it's something that I think that our society has seen something like this since 1918, right? The flu pandemic that happened then, but from SARS and other stuff that took place, that doesn't touch a candle to what's going on now. But I think I really want to thank you, and our viewers will thank you also, because it's just a big thing. But when we talk about that, you're seeing the sick and you're seeing these things happening, right? You're seeing right at the front what's going on, and obviously, you come from roots that are from in the Hindi culture or Indian culture is very Ayurvedic and very not I don't want to say natural health, but knowing that internally that our body has a health system, right? And and me and you were talking just before we got on about the evolutionary theory, right? Of health. And I'd love you to share with our listeners, your take on how we can actually become more healthy, and do that, especially with the evolutionary theory that we were talking about. I'm going to turn it over to you. I might flip over to have you just be on the screen alone, but go for it.
Yeah. So just to take a step back. The people that we are seeing in the ICU, they're not healthy people from the get-go. if on the occasion that we see a young individual, they're either morbidly obese or they're like heavy smokers. Like I've seen people in the ICU that are in their 20s or 30s but there is something abnormal, or there is something that they may have done to themselves that has dysregulated their immune system in some way. And if we take smoking, for example, we know that it inhibits the mucociliary function of the respiratory epithelium. It alters the immunologic process of the lungs. You have more neutrophils in the airways. And, so these are not people that are healthy to begin with.
Yeah.
And if we kind of keep that in mind, it really makes us wonder if we're healthy to begin with. That acts as a very strong line of defense, especially in the absence of any kind of curative or significantly supportive treatment.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the evolutionary theory, and like I personally am a pretty big believer in that, especially since I got involved in sleep medicine. Sleep is very evolutionary, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, I mean, there has to be an evolutionary reason for us to become as vulnerable as we do while we're sleeping. If it didn't have a very strong evolutionary purpose, we wouldn't sleep the way we do for 6 or 8 hours at a time. We would be sleeping like rats that sleep in small chunks,
right?
Or elephants that sleep kind of in chunks. Birds will sleep, half of their brain will sleep at a time while they're flying. Whales do the same thing. So all animals and all species have evolved in some way from an evolutionary standpoint. And if we look at humans, I think sleep is something that is very evolutionary, and it has a very strong biological purpose, and it needs to be healthy. Other things that are, I think, very evolutionary is that humans are supposed to be mobile. We're not designed to be sedentary, cooped up on a lockdown, so to speak, or working sedentary jobs or driving to work. We're supposed to be mobile. We're, I guess, hunters and gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. And all of this has only changed in the last maybe few hundred to 1,000 years. So, keeping that in mind, that we're supposed to be mobile, exercising routinely, getting exposed to adequate amount of sunshine, that's really important.
Right.
We were also talking about nutrition, and I think sleep is an important pillar of nutrition. Is an important pillar of wellness. Exercise is an important pillar of wellness. Nutrition is an important pillar of wellness, and we're not designed to be eating for right now what happens is we're awake for about 16 hours of the day. If everyone's getting about an average of 8 hours of sleep,
right,
we're kind of munching throughout the day. And we're not, biologically speaking, our bodies are not designed to be eating for 16 hours of the day. We're designed to be eating during daylight hours, and the body, just like the brain is supposed to be resting during sleeping hours, so is the gut. Every organ in the body has a circadian rhythm to it. So the gut is supposed to be resting for about 12 hours too. So we shouldn't be eating for longer than 12 hours out of the day too.
Right.
So I think, so going back to the whole evolutionary concept, I think if we think about it, if we look at these principles and what happens in the absence of complying with these principles, I think result in pathology. So the absence of exercise leads to, like, I don't even need to talk about it, obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and on and on. Having bad eating habits leads to, again, a lot of comorbidities.
Right. Right.
The lack of...
And like you said, you talked about, the people that you were seeing, the ones who are, on ventilators, and this isn't every single person, but from what you've been seeing is the people who came in with issues already present, right? And if we can get that message of being well or creating wellness out, we're talking about symptoms here, right? Symptoms that come about because we're not taking care of our core fundamentals, right? And
Right.
that, like you said, sleeping, eating, proper nutrition, exercise, probably mental attitude, right? Because that's
Right.
a big piece of it, right? And in the chiropractic world, we see all of that along with what we do. It affects the nervous system, right? And the nervous system, of course, as you learned in medical school and throughout, is a master control system of everything inside the body, right? From every tissue, organ, system, and cell in the body. So, if everybody doing that, if we're all working together to bring this human, right, this human body back into a state of, we'll call it normalcy, or state of evolutionary plateau where we're doing what we're supposed to be doing with our bodies, we're going to be much healthier, right? It's just what's there. And I got to tell you, I can imagine what you see in sleep. Like right now, if people aren't sleeping, right, their cortisol levels will skyrocket and all these things, blood pressure, all these things happen, right? And, and it's just from sleeping or not sleeping, correct? Or sleeping, circadian rhythms being off. I mean, man, that must be a rabbit hole in itself, right? As
It
you're
is.
studying.
It definitely is, and you'll be amazed that if we look at the management of chronic insomnia, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just a series of behavioral interventions, is actually more effective than pharmacologic therapy.
Yeah.
So that even speaks more to the point that habits have such a big role to play when it comes to developing a healthier system, whether that is a sleep system or a exercise system or a eating system.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind away that even though we're always chasing that quick pill, that there's a lot of data that suggests that that's usually not the best way to go.
Absolutely. And we've always said that health comes from within. So in chiropractic, it's, yes, you can eat well, but your body has to digest that and be able to take it, just like you talked about. If you're eating 24 hours a day or eating at nighttime, more than during the waking hour, during the daylight hours, that kind of thing, your body's going to react differently, right? So health is something that we can build from within, right?
Right.
And then if you get to that point where you need intervention, we're certainly thrilled that intervention is there, right? But that's usually that intervention is because we're not doing those components, right? We're not taking care of our nervous system. We're not taking care of our nutrition, exercise, our movement, like you talked about, our sleep patterns and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure I just got this feeling. I'd love to talk to you in another 10 years and we'll talk much more between that, but I'd love to find out, what the internet is doing, or even just now with the COVID, it's kind of like everyone's on the computer. I mean, Zoom is off the charts, right? And what's happening with all the stimulation that our brains are getting right now, and how that could be throwing us off. I'm wearing blue blockers, but how that throws us off, on our sleep patterns, right? And things like that, because I don't think the average person, not the doctors out there, but the average, citizen has any idea how important sleep is.
No, absolutely. We run into this all the time. And there's plenty of circadian data that proves that excessive light invasion is the term that we use, whether that's invasion from your television or your cell phone or a tablet or even rooftop lighting, has a significant effect in delaying sleep onset, and by a couple hours in normal people. I mean, there's a researcher from Colorado, I forgot his name. He's written a book too. And I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
What he did was he took people who claimed that they were delayed sleep phase, which basically means people who characterize themselves as night owls and who also had a delay in the onset of melatonin. Melatonin is a sleep hormone, as you know.
Yeah.
And like physiologically, melatonin starts to rise before we go to sleep. And light inhibits endogenous melatonin production. So what he did was he took these group of like almost 20 or 30 individuals who claimed that they were night owls and they couldn't sleep at nighttime. and he took them into a campsite. And after about, I think it was 7 or 14 days, he shifted their biologic clock from somebody who would go to bed at midnight or 1, and these guys were naturally falling asleep at 8 or 9, because there was the absence of technology, there was absence of exogenous or any light invasion, and they were basically resynchronized or re-entrained to light and dark cues, basically from the sun during daytime and the absence of the sun at nighttime.
Yeah, and it's so cool how our brains actually adapt like that, right?
Yeah,
That makes it happen. I was thinking when you were saying that we could just send them to India because 12 and a half hour, 11 and a half hour time difference, they'd be sleeping at night. That's what happens to me, especially when I come back. But hey, let's end our conversation right now. There's something very cool that you kind of came up with, and I know you did this on a level of just to allow the layperson to kind of have a better understanding of how to stay healthy during this issue. And everybody knows washing their hands and that's all pretty common knowledge. But you came up with vitamin S.
Yeah.
S as in Sam, vitamin S. Share with us about your vitamin S that you and your wife came up with.
Yeah. So like the story, the concept behind it is, if we think of when there's the absence of cure, then prevention becomes one of the most important things.
Yeah.
And if you think about, and in medicine, everything is acronyms, so it's easier to memorize. So I basically tried to come up with acronyms that words that started with the letter S and put them into lines, into different, what's the right word? Like different levels of barriers. Yeah. So the first barrier would be something like, how do I prevent myself from getting exposed? So social distancing, and like, how do I prevent myself from getting exposed to the virus? Yeah. That's the first thing, right? That's the first line of defense that I would think of when it comes to prevention. So social distancing, I thought was extremely important. And staying home is extremely important, right? These are two things that really prevent us from even getting exposed, and that's a really strong barrier to protect ourselves.
Right.
The second barrier I was thinking was, is if it comes on me, if the virus gets on my hands, how do I get rid of it? So soap and water is an extremely way of now, let's say by chance I couldn't participate in social distancing. I, for some reason, could not stay home. And now that it's on me, the way to get rid of it would be soap and water.
Yeah.
And soap and water, cleaning our hands for 20 seconds to break down the lipid membrane of the virus, so to get rid of it. And then let's say that it gets on me and I forgot to do soap and water and it ends up getting in me. What could I potentially do to boost my immune system so I don't get sick? So then it was like, all right, so what are ways to support your immune system?
Right.
And we know from, if you go back 50 years or 100 years, about 100 patients who had tuberculosis back in the days, in the absence of antimicrobial therapy, they would send these people to sanatoriums.
Yeah.
And what would happen over there is these guys would get good nutrition, these guys would get adequate sunshine, these guys would stay away from each other, like, social distancing. And a significant portion of these people would get better because the immune system would get rid of these things.
Right.
So that, plus just biologically speaking and from the evolutionary standpoint, there are ways that we could potentially support our immune system. And I think those are through adequate amount of sunshine or exercise, which was the other S. I couldn't think of a good way of incorporating nutrition, so I called it solid nutrition, either a nutrition that is, well balanced and is within a reasonable time window. So solid nutrition. And the other thing was, gosh, I'm blanking right now. sleep, right? Yeah, I'm like, that's my specialty.
Come on, from a sleep fellowship.
Yeah, and we know that sleep is extremely important. Whether we extrapolate from data that comes from post-vaccine, the lack of sleep, how these people response. I mean, the biologic response is a lot weaker to a vaccine if somebody receives a vaccine and gets inadequate sleep the following night. So we can extrapolate from that kind of data that sleep does have a strong immune role to play when it comes to supporting the immune system.
Yeah.
So, and then lastly, for me, mental health is extremely important. And a lot of my mental health comes from some form of spirituality.
Yeah.
And that spirituality could, and we've talked about this before, and that also start with the words S, the letter S, Seva, Satsang, and Simran.
Yeah.
And what that means, Seva is a Hindi word, which basically means doing things for other people. Satsang is a form
Seva
of
is service, right?
Service, yes, service, correct. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Satsang is a form of a congregation that talks about, spirituality and good, and that for me leads to good mental health. And then Simran is just kind of a internal mantra, so to speak, of just reminding ourselves that of something that has some spiritual balance to it. So just kind of summarizing it again, vitamin S started off with the combination of different lines of defense. First being, staying home. And if you can't stay home, then social distance yourself. The second line of defense, if it gets on you, use soap and water. You don't need Lysol or Purell, which are, very challenging to get in today's times, but soap and water is adequate. And then thirdly, supporting the immune system through adequate sleep, adequate solid nutrition, and adequate sunshine and exercise.
Right.
And then lastly, for me especially, is some form of spirituality, because to me that brings a lot of mental health.
Yes, absolutely. And and as in chiropractic, we support the nervous system, right? And by when we do the work that we do and remove vertebral subluxations, we're accessing the nervous system, which then accesses all the systems in the body. And I think all of those in combination are just so beautiful, because it's just, and I really think this, I love what you said at the end, with the spirituality, because, the stress that people are under right now, or the unknown stress that they're under, they might not actually know how stressful they are, right? Until you get out of it. It's kind of like having a wedding, right? And putting on a wedding, and then, you're leaving on your honeymoon, and you sleep for 2 days. You don't realize that, oh my God, my body was really put under stress. That if we start doing these things right now, taking care of ourselves, and proper nutrition and eating and exercise or movement, and doing all these different things, and making sure that we're doing all the things that we know to do, along with keeping our nervous system strong, we're just going to have a healthier body. So, Sahil, thank you. I so appreciate you taking the time. I know you're probably at nighttime in the hospitals, at daytime. I don't know if you're on online courses right now or not. I don't know what Harvard ended up doing, but I know you're probably busy with 2 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment in Boston, and 4 of you in a 1-bedroom apartment. I can just imagine.
And a dog.
Huh?
And we have a 100-pound German Shepherd.
And a dog. Well, I didn't tell the viewers you're from LA, so I know that you're probably going to end up coming back right after Boston. You'll come back to Los Angeles and have more sunshine. But please stay safe, and I want to thank you for sharing with our viewers today. It's so cool to have you share your knowledge and what took place and the things that you've been seeing, and just the gift that you're bringing, and sharing that. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, and we'll get you back on again and talk again. And to our viewers, thank you for hanging with us, and for hopefully picking up some good gems today. I know there's some great pearls of wisdom that Dr. Chopra dropped on us. And just remember to keep your loved ones close, and stay in contact with the people that you love, and make sure that you're Zooming with people if that's what you need to do. But most of all, take care of yourself and live your life from above down, inside out. And remember that within you yeah, there's a power greater than we've ever been led to believe. So thanks for being with us on the LifeQuest Leadership Line. And until I see you, until you were able to join up again at our next edition, stay safe.